Good morning, everybody. My name is Barbara Spanó, and I would like to welcome you to our first webinar on European funding for innovation. The European Innovation Council is Europe's flagship innovation program to identify, develop, and scale up breakthrough technologies and game-changing innovation. The webinar will focus on the instrument of the EIC and give both information and inspiration in how to succeed. The event has been organized by the Danish Agency for Higher Education and Science in collaboration with the Greater Copenhagen EU Office. Before we move on with the program, just a few housekeeping rules. The webinar will be recorded, and if you're not fine with them, then unfortunately we will ask you to leave the webinar. The microphones for all the participants are muted and your cameras are off, so nobody will be able to see you. The Q&A function is active, and there it will be possible for you to ask questions. And of course, in case you ask questions, the participant will be able to see your name or the name that you have used for the registration in the Zoom webinar. If you have other technical issues or comments of any kind, please use the chat. Kathrine and I will have a look both at the Q&A function and at the chat. Now for the agenda of the day. After a short welcome and presentation of the program, we will move on with a presentation on the European Innovation Council given by Professor Irina Borodina. Irina is a professor at the Technical University of Denmark. She is one of the European Innovation Council Ambassador, and she is also winner of different EU projects, both within Horizon 2020 and I think also previously previous framework program. We will then move on with the Pathfinder, that is one of the instruments within the European Innovation Council, and that will be presented by Simon Hertig. He also works at the Technical University of Denmark, and he is he's a liaison officer for the university, and he is based in Brussels, and he has a lot of experience with the Pathfinder instrument. Then we will have a presentation on the Accelerator and Transition given by Rasmus Mørk. Rasmus works at the Greater Copenhagen EU Office, and he has also a lot of experience with the instrument, and he cooperates both with the universities and companies. And then a few closing remarks with my colleague Kathrine, that also works at the Ministry of Higher Education and Science. So just a few words on us and why we are here today. Kathrine and I, we are what it is called a national contact point. Being a national contact point for Horizon Europe means that we support Danish participants in getting as much money and project within Horizon Europe. Kathrine and I, we also work as program committee delegate, and with that function, we have the possibility to have an influence on the content of the program in collaboration with the other member states and the European Commission. I work with the focus on transition and accelerator, and then beside the European Innovation Council, I am also national contact point for legal and financial issues. Kathrine, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. I would like to present myself as well. My name is Kathrine Henning, and I am the NCP for EIC Pathfinder and also for the European Research Council.
Thank you. Here, just a few more bullet points about what the program is about. As I said before, it aims at identifying and supporting breakthrough technologies. And another element that is very important for the program itself is that it supports all stages of innovation, from research and development to validation and demonstration of breakthrough technologies. So there you can see and look at what you work with and where what you work with can be placed in the relevant stage, and then look at the possibilities that are within the program. This is a very slide with a lot of information. It is just an overview of the instrument that we have within the European Innovation Council, all the dates for the calls during this year, so 2022, and the budget that is allocated for the instrument. So that's the budget for the entire instrument and not for the proposal themselves. But the other speaker will go through with more details, both about what the instruments are about, what is in there for you, and also the deadline and the budget allocated. So here, when we have, Kathrine and I had a look at the list of the participants, we could see that you come from different kind of organization, institution, both from the public sector and also from the private sector. And there I would like to say that you can, of course, write a proposal by yourself, but there is help to get all around in Denmark. So there is help at the universities, at the research support function, the central, regional European office, the Danish EU office also offers support when applying for the European Innovation Council. Then you can also get support by the Enterprise Europe Network. There are also a lot of consultants throughout Denmark that support applicants. And of course, you are always welcome to take a contact with us. It was a bit difficult to have a slide to design which support is given by all the different kind of institutions. But again, if you work at the universities, try to get in contact with the research function. If you are located in a specific region, so get in contact with the relevant region. There are, as I said, also consultants, and you are always more than welcome to get in contact with us. Here, just to close, another kind of support that we give at the ministry. It is called Eoc Starter, and it is a financial support that help applicants when writing an application. Here there are some information regarding the application deadlines in 2022 and the max funding that you can apply for. And at the bottom of the slide, you have a link where you can get all the information for applying to the program and see when it is relevant to apply. And just like we just got an question in the question and answer function, then I just replied to it now. The slides will be shared with all the participants. The recording will be available online from next week, and the slides will also be put on our website. So with this word, I leave the floor to Professor Irina Borodina. Please, Irina, you are welcome to start.
Yes, thank you very much, Katrina. Thank you for the invitation, and thanks everybody for participation. Good morning. I believe that you're here because you have some great innovation that you want to translate into real life, and you lack financing for it. And I can understand that you lack financing. It is very difficult to get the funding, and it's very difficult to get their capital investments when you are in EU in comparison to, for example, US. So if you look at this graph in 2020, their total amount of venture capital investment in Europe was only $35 billion. So where do you go? Well, actually, a very good place to go is the European Innovation Council. In 2022, so this year, they're going to give away 1.7 billion euros. And this will be given both in the form of the grants and also in the form of the equity financing. And there are three main funding schemes. So you can find there, most likely you can find one of the schemes suitable for your development stage among this. So for the early development stage, if you have a breakthrough innovation that you need to take it from there, more or less like from the proof of concept to this early showing that it actually works, then probably the right tool would be the Pathfinder. So the Pathfinder gives up to 4 million euros grants, and basically supports visionary research on some breakthrough technologies. The other instrument is the transition. So transition instrument is limited to their earlier grantees of their Pathfinder, so the previous tool, and also ERC proof of concept. But if you are so lucky that you have participated in those calls and you have received the money there and basically developed your proof of concept, then through this grant instrument, you can mature your technology and you can build the business case. But then I think the most interesting scheme is actually the EIC Accelerator. And it's also the largest one. So there is more than 1 billion euros allocated in this year for this scheme. So what you can get is their money to develop and to scale up your innovation. The grant, you can get a grant of up to 2.5 million euros, and you can additionally choose to apply for the equity investment of up to 15 million euros. So you can also choose only to go for the grant. So it's basically up to you and what your business needs. I put a link here on my slide for the application form. I would say that in comparison to their application forms in the Horizon 2020, which maybe some of you have tried, and which are like really, really difficult to fill in, and you don't know what to write there. This form is interactive. It's basically you fill in some boxes where there are relatively small amounts of text that you need to write in each box. It is made in a way of a business plan, so more or less like you basically create online a business plan. So I think it's I think it was a bit difficult in the beginning, so we actually tried to apply for this grant with our company. But I would say I prefer this one to the previous just the award forms. Then I would also like to bring your attention that there is an advantage for the applicants who have women in their top management. So previously it was only limited to the women CEOs, but now they have expanded it. So women CTO, CSO, and COO also get an advantage. And now you might be sitting and thinking, well, is this for my company? Can I apply? Maybe I'm too small, maybe I'm too big. So if we look at their companies that have been supported by the previous instrument from 2014-2021, then there are both the micro companies that were supported, which is between 1 to 9 employees. There are small companies, there are medium companies. So the large companies above 250 employees are not supported, but basically everything below that, that's good for you. It's of course expected that your innovation also contributes to the Sustainable Development Goals. So it cannot be some kind of a financial scheme or something like this. So it needs to bring benefit to the society, and all their companies that have received the money, they do address some SDG goals. But apart from that, whether you work with digital technologies or whether you work with Green Deal type startups, or you work with medical solutions, basically all of this, there is no discrimination towards any kind of particular areas. So you can apply from any area. And interesting fact, so in 2020, over 20% of the companies that have received the funding for this scheme, they have a female CEO. So what I just want to highlight a few successes. So there were 5 in the previous calls from 2014-2020. So there were 5,500 of startups and small and medium enterprises that were supported, located in different countries in Europe, member states. Together they obtained about 3 billion euros in grant funding. But they additionally raised 3 times more money as follow-up investments. And this EIC, it gives you access to different events and meetings where as a startup or SME, you can pitch at these events, and the success rates are very high. So there is a very large amount of corporates and investors who attend these meetings, and about 40% of those startups that have done the pitches, they do have follow-up meetings, and I think about 25% of them they receive they close their financing within a very near future after that. So the value of their EIC portfolio company has increased by over 50%. It's a huge growth, and actually within this portfolio there are now 2 unicorns, so that's companies that were evaluated at more than 1 billion euros, and there are also, I think, more than 90 centaurs. So that's the companies that were evaluated at more than 100 million euros. And you can see here that Denmark as well. So there were also several companies that were financed from Denmark that also have received very high valuation. So it is an excellent support for the growth of your company. So I myself started a company called Pathfinder, where we work on production of safe and environmentally friendly pest control solutions using pheromones. And I started the company in 2016, but the operations first could start in 2018. And this was largely thanks to their Horizon 2020 grant, which also supported their or motivated the private investors to go in and put in the seed investment of 3 million euros. Then we also, the company also received about 3 million euros from the BBIG, so that's fire-based industries. And we managed to demonstrate the production of our first product at full scale with the support of these grants and the seed investment. And this basically gave us so much credibility that we went into Series A, and we raised 15 million euros there. And this year we hope to bring our first product on the market. So for each of their €1 of the EU grants that the company has received, we raised there more than 4 euros of the venture capital. So that was basically what I wanted to share with you, and if there are some questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Irina. I think that was a very nice introduction to what EIC is, and of course we'll get more in detail in a minute. We have received a question, and I don't know if you see it yourself, but I will read it to you. An equity follow-up application to a grant-only EIC Accelerator project, does it need to be significantly different to the original application, or can it be the same project with an updated business plan? I don't know if you're able to answer this.
This I'm actually not sure. I think it's more common that you apply simultaneously for both their grant and the equity financing. I'm actually not sure if you can actually apply for equity only as a follow-up.
Okay.
But I will investigate this, and maybe when you're going to share the slides, we can add this answer. Yeah, I'll check.
And maybe Rasmus, yes. I think Rasmus would like to answer.
Rasmus, excellent. Thank you.
Leave the floor to you, Rasmus, please.
Yeah, thanks,
thank you.
Thanks, and thank you, Irina, for an excellent presentation. Yeah, so if you have already received EIC Accelerator funding and you didn't finish your project yet, then you can seek equity only. You can also actually apply for equity only if you didn't get a grant. But Irina is very right. The normal thing is to seek both grant and equity at the same time, or grant only. I will get into more details about the equity and how much equity and what are the conditions and all that in my presentation.
I would say with the same project you probably cannot apply, because basically when you apply when you write your grant application, yes, the business plan probably is similar, but what you basically describe as the project is what you're going to do and what you're seeking the money for, then you expect it also to be able to do that for this money. So you expect to succeed and complete what you got the money for. So I would not expect that you can then apply for the same thing again. That's definitely not possible.
But if you have already, I mean, almost finished your projects, your grant projects, and you applied only for grants, and now you want equity, it is possible, and of course it should be updated. So to answer the question directly, yes, it should be a new, an updated business plan.
Yes,
you can apply for equity.
You need to expand the scope of what you're going to do as well, right?
Yes, because for that you have already received the grant, so it should be a development. But we got also a few more questions.
We have another question for you, Irina. Did you write your grant applications yourself, or did you use professional writers?
Yeah, I always write grant applications myself, and obviously together with their partners, if there are some partners involved. But I do get support from some professional writers for reviewing. So maybe 2 reviews during the writing process. So one early review to review the strategy, and also to make sure that all the requirements of the call they are fulfilled. And then a second review towards the end to check the final application for consistency and things like that. But I think the application is really, you need to, like, to get the money, you need to come through, you need to really want it, you need to burn for it, you need to, you need to argue for it. A consultant cannot do this for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Then we have a comment. Somebody's telling you fantastic story. Congratulations. And then we just have a final question for you, Irina, which is, thank you for your presentation. Is IBB as a fund or a loan?
Actually, can it be the BBI? Is it bio-based industries?
Yeah, it's a BBI. Yes, it's the acronym. Sure.
Yeah. So BBI joint undertaking. It's a financing which is also within the Horizon 2020 program, and it's a financing which is for mainly directed towards bio-based industries. It has now changed its name. I unfortunately forgot the abbreviation. I can check it up, and then I can actually post there an answer to this question. What's the new name is? So it is again active. And it is a grant, but you need to provide a certain co-financing. So I think our companies usually will get about 70% of their expenses covered, and then 30% of the expenses of the project you need to provide it in your own funds. But it's not the loan or an equity financing.
Thank you. Then, thank you so much, Irina, for your presentation and for answering questions. I just want to say to all of you that if you have questions that we're not able to answer straight away, then we'll save them, we'll keep them, and find the answers and send them out to you after the webinar, along with the presentations from today and a link to the recording of the webinar. So, but thank you so much, Irina.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and good luck to everybody.
Tell everybody that Irina is leaving, so if you have more questions to her, they can be answered afterwards. Thank you again, Irina, for the very much inspiring presentation. Thank you. Bye. Yes, and now we move on to the next speaker, and it is Simon Hertig from DTU, and he will introduce with more details the Pathfinder instrument. Simon, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you, Kathrine, and congratulations once again to Irina. It's a very, very good representative from DTU, so we're very happy that she was able to join. I will try to explain a little bit about the Pathfinder. So to start with, my name is Simon. I am the Liaison Officer for DTU in Brussels. So normally I will be based in Brussels. Today I'm actually at the campus at DTU. DTU has its mission to develop and create value through the technical and natural sciences for the benefit of society. And that's actually quite important. Also why we are very interested in this kind of instrument, because this is an instrument which very much supports our way of thinking research in sciences. We have a strategy that's focusing specifically on offering the best European engineering education, also throughout life, develop technology for sustainable change, and assume leadership of the opportunities offered by digitization. So we are a rather large institution having incomes on around 750 million euros a year, both basic funding and also external funding. And of this external funding, we receive around 45 million euros per year from Horizon Europe. In Horizon 2020, we have been the 10th most successful higher educational institution when measured on funding, specifically within biotech, as Irina, for instance, or secure and clean and efficient energy. So it's not unusual that we are very strong in this position. And that's something we're very happy about. So the EIC Pathfinder, which is the instrument we're going to talk about today, is a fairly new instrument, but also based on what is called, formerly was called the Future Emerging Technology Instrument. And it is very technology focused, which is why we like it, of course, as a technical institution. And it's also covering the lower TRL, so TRL 1 to 4. So what they technically do is support multidisciplinary research team to undertake visionary research with the potential to lead to technology breakthroughs. This is a very important understanding of how it was and also is, that it is multidisciplinary research. And in that sentence, it is what we see in successful team is not necessarily that they're coming for all kind of multidisciplinary backgrounds, but they have a stronghold within photonics, biotechs, materials, or whatever, but there is a combination to another field. So there is this edge, so to speak. In the Pathfinder Open, which is one of the calls that we're going into, is Pathfinder is going into either an open or a challenge-based funding stream. The open is, as it says, open. You can come from different institutions. You can come from, have your own question that you want to answer, while the challenge is a specific challenge that you will have to give an answer to. When we are in the Pathfinder, you have to be in a consortia of 3 entities from 3 different member states. And not in member states, but different eligible countries. You also have associated countries, of course. In the challenges, you can actually come down to a single entity being a mono-beneficiary now, or a partnership of 2 countries. It is still in the atmosphere. It doesn't say you have to be, but when it says multidisciplinary research, it's of course easier to do if you're multiple partners. But it is possible to argue, if you can find the right way to argue and come forward with it, that you can actually be a single entity, either a institution, higher education institution, RTO, or a company, SME. But you would have to, is my suggestion, argue why is it that you can do this as a single entity. You have to justify it a bit more. In the typical funding is between 3 and 4 million euros. For the Pathfinder Open, it's 3 million euro, while the challenges is up to 4 million euros. The success rates in the 2021, the first full year, it was 6.4%. We were a little bit higher at DTU, luckily, because of our great researchers, such as Irina. The duration of the projects lasts typically 1 to 3 years. I would say rather closer to 3 than 1, but that's always arguable. It also depends on what you are justifying your funding for. Is it research infrastructure, or very expensive sequencing, or what is it that you actually use it for? The challenges this year is 6 different ones. The first one, carbon dioxide, nitrogen management and valorization. Mid-term, long-term system integrated energy storage, cardiogenomics, healthcare continuum technologies, DNA-based digital storage, alternative quantum information processing, communication, and sensing. The interesting with these ones are always, why have they chosen these ones? And often what you see in these challenge-based systems is that it has something to do with European technology sovereignty or autonomy, depending on how you phrase it, that you are helping the European Union become a leader in a technology field and are in that way supporting. So you're actually, by your project, helping the EU to help its competitiveness in this technology field. There are 2 deadlines this year, the 3rd of May and October 19th. So the 3rd of May is for the open, and then October 19th is for the challenges. There is a total budget on 350 million euros split into the open and the challenge driven. So what do they actually look for when they are looking for these Pathfinder, when they have to go for the 5 to 10% best? Can you argue that you have a vision for the future that can make a real difference for people's life? That's of course a very open question, but often when you see, it's not the technology for the sake of technology, but actually if you can argue that you are helping on people's lives in one way or another, it will be an advantage. One thing is also, can you show a roadmap, or can you say you have found a new material that you can, for instance, argue will ease or make it the scientific breakthrough more plausible? So you actually have a science-based method to argue that funding your project will actually make some changes. And why is it that so? Is a thought, or is it a theory, or is it actually a plausible way? And do you have a roadmap for it? Then you have this question, can you imagine collaborating with an interdisciplinary team? Compared to calls in the second pillar, you often see smaller teams. So participants the consortiums often being between 3, 4, 5 different institutions. So the ticket sizes for each participant is possibly higher, but that also means that you should also be able to still work together as an interdisciplinary team of researchers and innovators. And can you prove this proof of principle and validate the scientific basis? And can you argue that you have found the best partners to do this? That is also, why is it that you have chosen this RTO, this company? What is it that they are excellent in? And how have you collaborated together before? Or have you any other kind of managerial opportunities or abilities to collaborate? That is also a way to convince them. Then you have the part of convincing long-term vision of a radical new technology. When you say radical new technology, it's often in the science field based on new insights and so on, but it's also, can you envision how this new idea, invention affects people's life and actually can have a positive impact to our economy and society? So it's not only, as again said, it's not science for the sake of technology development, but it's technology development for the basis of empowering people and society. I will go to the last point on high risk, high gain. The EIC is set up in this way that they would rather, they have actually a mandate to go for the high risk, high gain rather than the secure novelty, so to speak, and securing that what you are arguing will happen under any circumstances. This is saying that you have a vision that you have argued that is plausibly going to change something and can lead to a scientific breakthrough that can benefit society. But it also has to be really high gain. You have to argue that it is possible to change European life in one way or another. If you can do that, then it's easier for the EIC to argue that you should have the grant than if it's only an incremental innovation, so to speak. So if we look at the first results on who the typical recipients are for the open part in 2021, it's primarily higher and secondary education. So it is research institutions. You also see private companies, so it's more often innovation-driven SMEs, spin-out companies or spin-out from already existing companies. And you also see RTOs, but it's a bit dependent on countries and so on. I've taken an example for one of the projects from DTU. This is a Mopala, which is a marketable polymer based on AIS battery. If you see the consortium, there are 3 universities beside DTU, so Southampton, Leicester, and then TU Graz, and then 2 RTOs. So it's a rather big consortium, but it is also very focused. And there, as you can see, you have a lot of people working on it dedicatedly. So this is a typical case from a successful consortium. When I say, well, what I see in those successful is that they actually are helping each other and adding to each other's capabilities. but they're still within the same field. So even though we still see multi-beneficiaries and we say multi-collaborative research institutions, you will still be within the natural sciences, and then maybe with biotech methodology or engineering, energy engineering theory, or something that is non-typically. So you would often, at least in my opinion, see strong consortiums who are the best in their field within a specific, for instance, polymers, then adding on to a specific industry as the AIS batteries in this case. That is kind of my show from now. I will be happy to take some questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Simon, for this presentation. It was very, very good information. And we have a lot of questions coming in for you.
Sure.
So I'll just start and we'll see if you can answer it. So
Sure.
First, we have a question from Samantha who's asking, could multidiscipline include commercial, or is it purely technical?
It can also be commercial. So for instance, as you saw in the consortium before, it was rather focused on the technology side. But if you can argue that a new business model is needed in a specific segment, then you can argue that it will help. So for instance, if you're working in, there's a lot of Green Deal calls being supported. So within the green field, if you can argue that including partners from social science and their approach can be helpful to your consortium to penetrate new markets or the likelihood with the new area, then it can be arguable. I wouldn't give them as big as ticket size as the others, because it is technologies that you have to develop as well. So it can be arguable, but I would rather, if I should just suggest, do the technical Pathfinder consortium and then add them on in the transition, which Rasmus will go into later on. They also have something called, which is like cascade funding on 50,000 euros, which is for the business development of it. So I would maybe, you can do it and you can argue for it, but I would suggest actually to try to keep it focused and then wait for the transition mechanism, which Rasmus will go into later on.
Great, thank you. I see Samantha's in the chat writing, thank you, that answers the question very well.
Perfect.
And then we have another question coming from Laura, who says, it seems that most of the recent EIC Pathfinder open-funded projects within Horizon Europe are dealing with tangible technologies. FED was in the Horizon 2020, part of Pillar 1, Excellent Science, while EIC is now in Pillar 3, Innovative Europe. Do you think that that has had an impact in the scope of the projects?
Oh, that's hard to say already, but I think when you see Pathfinder have been moved, as Laura is writing directly, is going from the first pillar to the third, I think you should see the Pathfinder as a pipeline. So what they were a bit lacking before maybe was that all the technologies that we're very good at developing in Europe, there wasn't a follow-up funding necessarily, or not a natural follow-up funding mechanism for the calls. There is now, and that's how I would perceive it. I wouldn't say that just because that you would be funded in the FED before, you cannot be funded in the EIC or the other way around. But I think they really would like to see also from their own perspective that they can actually fund projects all the way from idea stage to incorporation in a company and for the scale-up process. So they can argue that EU-funded projects are actually a benefit to the European continent and the technology autonomy as well.
Thank you. Another question from Stephanie. Do the TRL refer to the TRL company's core technology, which might already be high, or can one apply for Pathfinder to fund a sub-project with still low TRL?
Oh, that's a good question. We've had it before. So if you are a company or a research, remember this is projects that they're finding, not companies directly, right? It's not equity in that sense that we wait for Rasmus to go into. But when it is projects, I would say you can still do subfields or sub projects of your already existing technologies to enhance it. But it's I wouldn't say it's the right way to go. Actually, it can be done, and I've seen it when they got very, very good marks and so on. But the EIC would rather fund dedicated project teams where the ticket size that are rather high in these situations are being useful for the projection forward. So that is like the main focus of the team. And if they can see that you already have a technology and just want to advance it, then they kind of are putting themselves into the situation. Okay, then when you're done enhancing this, will you then actually commercialize it, or will you just add for another grant to advance that again? So it can be done, but I would actually recommend to then say, can you go for another project with GRL 4 or 5 if you're already there? I don't know if it answers the question, but that would be my way of doing it.
Thank you. Then we have another question. Which domains, industries get the most number of projects? Pharma, energy sector, manufacturing, etc.
Good question. I don't have the numbers right now, but they are, for instance, the Green Deal aspect is very important. And so is some of the other, they had some COVID calls as well. I would say those projects who have the easiest way to get access is where you have a large capital intensity. So especially energy, battery storage, these kind of things, where you can actually argue that if you can make advancements in this area, it's actually improving the technical developments in Europe, and not software or anything like that. So it has to be capital intensive and a very high technically focused. That's in that way, it makes it easier to argue to go that way. I haven't seen a comprehensive overview yet from all the calls because we still need the EIC challenges, Pathfinder challenges, and some other results from 2021. But I at least see within the Green Deal aspects that there is a very, very high interest and also a rather high number of successful projects funded.
Thank you. And of course, I just want to add that we are very interested in this as well. Of course, that's very interesting for us to know, but we haven't received this data either yet from EIC. So, but hopefully we'll know at some point. Sure. Yeah. Another question, what characteristics do successful proposals share? For example, mainly lab work, validation, or integration and small-scale demonstration activities. Can you say some?
I cannot say anything generically, but I can say that what I see in the teams, that it's often focus researchers that have been collaborating to some extent before, who are doing coming with theories and that can go into practices within, for instance, energy that I have been looking at the most, where they can say this can actually make significant cost reductions in the industry. This can make for instance, long-term duration battery storage. This can make the same kind of material work for longer, and by that also adding to the field. But it's very focused. But then when they say multidisciplinary, they still would like a seasoning from other areas. So where you can say the special sauce is coming from, that at least something that I've seen before. But if that is something generically, it's too early to say, I would say. But I would like to point something out that Irina also mentioned out is the review process. Have somebody either from your own field or from a completely different field doing the early stage review process, and in the final review process is something that is significantly increasing the chances. It doesn't have to be a consultant necessarily, but somebody who's actually used to do applications themselves within their own scientific field. That has helped a lot on and also because it's a rather easy application, so it's 17-25 pages. Compared to the cluster 2 calls, typically, or the second pillar calls where it's 70 pages.
Thank you. We have 2 questions. I think we have time for both of them. So one from Melde, who writes, does the technological breakthrough have to originate from academic research, or are companies with independent technologies fitting the application criteria as well?
I actually wouldn't be able to answer that. I primarily focus on research-driven or university-driven applications where it comes out of a scientific paper or some other insights. I haven't been trying with a company-driven before, but in my mind, it theoretically it shouldn't make a difference. But I haven't tried it, so I cannot say it out of experience.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I agree with you, Simon, that I'm fairly sure that that companies themselves can fit the application criteria as well. But I'll be happy to look up on it and send a more comprehensive answer. Konstantin asks, what is a better strategy, having a consortium of university labs with the aim to spin off after, or having a SME already as a partner for Pathfinder application?
Oh, that's interesting, and we've discussed it internally as well. I think if you can argue in the consortium of research labs that you are actually having capabilities or young postdocs or PhD that might be able to do the commercial path, if you're successful in delivering the scientific breakthroughs, I would go for that, because then it's you don't have to incorporate and have a company registered and do all the administrative stuff on that one. But on the other side, you're also signaling by incorporating to the grant givers that you actually are already out there wanting to commercialize it. So that is kind of the signaling that you're doing. I've seen both things work, but in general, coming from a scientific institution, we often argue that please wait and actually do the technology development internally before you spin it out, because it might be that in 1 year and 1.5 years that it's another spin out setup that you actually need. It can be a joint venture with a large corporation. It can be the other stuff. So, and also, where do you do it? Who are the right PhDs or postdocs or industry experts that you are crowding into the project to commercialize it? So I would wait until you're sure that you have been doing this scientific breakthrough that you're aiming at.
Great. Thank you so much, Simon. I think that was the questions that we had for you. And again, thank you so much for a great presentation. And I know that, you are available for questions.
Absolutely.
Afterwards as well. And Malte, I'm sorry that we couldn't have a more clear answer to your questions. I will get back to you.
Yes, but thank you very much again, Simon, for your presentation. And now we give the floor to Rasmus from Greater Copenhagen EU Office, and he will go through the Accelerator and the Transition Program. So please, Rasmus, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. I will just see if I can share my screen correctly. Yes, so my name is Rasmus Mørk. I work for the Greater Copenhagen EU Office. And as Barbara and Kathrine said earlier, we are one of several regional offices based in Brussels. So if your company or you are a researcher not based in Eastern Denmark, then there is also help, and the contacts will be on my last slide also for my colleagues in other regions. So I work for the Greater Copenhagen EU Office covering all of Eastern Denmark. We work for all the municipalities and regions in Eastern Denmark, as well as the largest universities, including DTU. We work to engage our members and companies in European collaboration to strengthen research, innovation, and development in Eastern Denmark. And we've been, I would claim, quite successful since 2017, including 22 successful full applications for EIC Accelerator, which was formerly known as the SME instrument. We have a sort of mainstreamed company service, which is in reality quite flexible depending on the company needs. But the sort of normal process is a 20-minute online meeting where we ask you as a company, what kind of product development projects do you have? How do you see your company future, including financing? And then we see if that can be matched to an EU funding program. And that can often lead to EIC Accelerator or Pathfinder or something else. But I will not have time to go through all the options here. I will be happy to send you more information later on other programs. So the next step is then validation of the funding chances. This is very important because you can also end up wasting a lot of time on writing EU application and not really have a good chance of getting it. Perhaps there's a better chance of Danish funding. Perhaps it's not really a public funding project that you have. Perhaps you should go more directly for pre-seed financing with equity or convertible notes or whatever. So we pay private consultants to have a meeting with your company, either online or at your place. And then the outcome of that meeting plus follow-up is a project outline of about 3 pages, which will show what would be a project with a good chance of funding, who should be the partners, if any. And that outline can, in many cases, be used to apply for Danish pre-proposal funding, the EU Upstart that Barbara mentioned earlier. We are not directly part of the application process. So the 22 successful projects, our part was quite small. We just helped the right people start at the right time with the right idea and told others not to bother. Often companies ask private consultants to write these applications, but it's not always necessary or a good idea. I will get back to more about how difficult it can be to write the full application for the EIC Accelerator. But as Irina also mentioned, you really have to commit own resources and a lot of hours into convincing the evaluators that you can bring this new technology to the market and scale up fast. So we do offer some support, especially if you choose to write yourself. We do also offer extra pitch training. Some of the programs, both the Transition and the Accelerator program, do have pitches. Many, as I said, do pay private consultants to do some of that. We have some complementary pitch training. It can be good to get other eyes on your pitch. So a couple of slides on Transition. I would guess that you are mostly interested in Accelerator, so I only have 2 slides on Transition. This funds maturing technology and commercial perspectives from a point of validated technology to a prototype. So you really have to think in both the business track and the commercial perspective, but it is still going from a quite research-heavy initial point, and you should keep that in the project. So please, if you were rejected from EIC Accelerator, do not try to stuff your Accelerator project into Transition. That will not work. You really have to have this multidisciplinary technology maturing into a Transition project. And the target group for this program is quite limited. It is only projects who can build on funded ERC, proof of concept, or Pathfinder, or the predecessor to Pathfinder projects that can actually apply for this. This is very important. A lot of people wasted their time because they didn't understand this. So please have that in mind. It is also important to note that big companies can apply for both Transition and also the Pathfinder. That was perhaps not so clear from that. Some companies do not live up to the SME definition in the EU because they are owned by more than 25% by a corporation, or perhaps more than 50% by an investment fund. Then they can still apply for Pathfinder and Transition. They cannot lead it as a mono beneficiary, at least in Transition, but they can be one of several partners. As you can see, there are some rules with maximum 5 partners. And you need at least 3 countries involved if you are 3 or more partners. Funding is quite generous. It's 100% funded as Pathfinder, and that includes a 25% overhead. You can get up to 2.5 million euros for 3 years projects normally. Sometimes you can argue that you can get an extension even. Not less than 2 years, then it's not possible really to make a competitive bid, claiming that you can make it in 1 year. Again, that would probably lead some people to think that you are in a hurry with the commercialization plans, and then you do not have sufficient methodology and scientific background in the project to be successful. Application is only 20 pages, Word format, as in Pathfinder still, and you only have to send in your pitch deck if you are actually invited to pitch. So they invite double of what they have funding for to pitch, so you will have a 50% chance if you get invited to pitch. There are some challenges which I've listed shortly here. You really have to read those very carefully in order to really pitch into what the EU wants for this challenge. And if you can do that, then the success rate will be higher than for the bottom-up open program, definitely. Success rate was actually quite low. I mean, 10% is, for me at least, surprising, given the quite limited target group. But what we also saw was some companies applying more than once for the same round, which was possible for some reason. So that may have risen the amount of applications. There are 2 deadlines, which works for both the open and the challenge. One last slide on the transition. So again, to highlight this duality of technology and business, meaning technology as a scientific maturing of the technology and thorough methodology for that with credible KPIs. The roadmap that Simon was mentioning earlier is also applicable to the transition. But then there's also the business track, the maturing of the technology in a business perspective, and of course also of the company. But the EIC Accelerator, which I will get onto in shortly, does demand something more mature, especially on the financing matureness of the company, which will not be possible to achieve with most transition projects. So please do think of a transition project as a project doing transition from a technological breakthrough to commercialization, but not necessarily to arrive as a good starting point for an EIC Accelerator application, because that might not be possible or even desirable for the company, because you might not be ready for equity at the right time, which would often be necessary in an EIC Accelerator project. So, of course, you also have to argue that you will be investment ready, but maybe not in as large scale as the EIC Accelerator. And as you can see, it was only 38% of the funded projects which was coordinated by companies. Also, perhaps a bit surprising, you can see there's a link of all the funded projects in 2021 with coordinators, but unfortunately not a list of the partners. Money beneficiary SMEs do have a chance in this, but it would probably have a better chance if you also involve researchers from universities in order to make sure that you really do have this methodology and the discourse of the presentation, that it has a duality of both the scientific background and the commercialization. So, Accelerator Basics. It is a large-scale demonstrator of a prototype with the first customer, and it is a lot of money, so very attractive for SMEs, and it's only SMEs who can apply for this, and only as money beneficiaries. So this means that you can demonstrate your prototype anywhere in the world where it makes sense, because an American or African or Asian partner would not actually be a partner in the project, but would just be the demonstrate site. So that makes it more flexible, and in some cases easier to argue that the demonstrator will actually open up the market for later scale up. So you need a prototype to start, and what we see is the competitive landscape is very, very competitive for this program. So we see also often a lot of companies who have actually already launched a minimum viable product on the market before they apply for this, and then they say that's a prototype for what they would want to launch in the future. And you can also sort of have a more mature company apply for this. It doesn't have to be, you know, the only project, the only product of the company which you are maturing for the first time with this. As you saw in Irina's slides, once equity was introduced into the program, the percentage of micro companies of the funded projects went down, and the medium-sized and small companies went up. So please also be aware of that in the competition for this. The scale-up has to be very, very ambitious, and you would need to think equity to finance that in order to be ambitious enough to be competitive for this program. They really look for high risk, high gain investment opportunities with very ambitious, but of course credible, but still very ambitious commercialization strategy. So I will get back to the equity. You can get between 500,000 and 15 million euros in equity. What we see average is mostly in the lower part of this, simply because you would think it into your financing rounds, and most of the companies applying for this do not want to sell out too much too fast, and that's fine with the EU. But some companies might be in a special situation for even wanting more than 15 million euros, perhaps especially health-related companies who have very high expenses for clinical research studies. Yeah, so the success rate is, as you can see, quite high for the short application. I will get back to the applications procedure in now, and then lower for the full application. So this is 2021 numbers, and that was the first time that the new application procedure was opened, with only 2 cutoffs for the full application, and well, a bit of a chaos, you could say, from the EU getting everything ready just in time or just after they should have. So that has also influenced the success rate. But so what I would estimate is that the success rate for the full application will probably go down in 2022. So be advised, it is very competitive. Most projects last 2 years, but it can be down to 1. So the application procedure is 2-staged. You have a short application with only 5 pages in the online platform, boxes and some features, but pretty straightforward. 10 slides, which you do not have to use for a pitch later. And then a 3-minute video where you sort of introduce the company and the team. That can be done by your company. It doesn't have to be very corporate video, really with very nice graphics and everything. It is more important to show team commitment and the vision of your company, and of course to show that you have something really breakthrough to the world. Full application is a lot harder, and many of the funded companies do use private consultants for that. Not all, probably, but it is difficult to really make a competitive bid on this online platform. And you also have to send in a pitch deck, which is the pitch deck that you will use for your pitch later on. You cannot change it. I mean, from what you send in to once you get invited for the pitch. Also 2 challenges, which I will explain further later. And the short application is running deadline and also running answers, which is nice. They take between 2 and 6 weeks to answer. And you need an answer for the module for the full application to open up on the online platform. And they have 3 cutoffs this year. Yeah, and the 23rd of March, if you do not have by now a short application approved, that will be close to impossible to make it then. So what do you need to get this money? You need, for the short application, this ambitious vision and a team committed to it. And you need to show that you build on new tech to some degree. I mean, because very, very heavy service projects can be very good business plans and even potential for unicorn, but it can be difficult to fit into this sort of program if you do not have some sort of tech involvement in it. Perhaps not, I mean, really, really radically new tech if it's IT supporting your service and consumable market, but still most of the projects funded are high-tech market creation or disruption based on really new tech. So the full application to be successful in that is mostly the commercialization strategy. It has to be credible that you can scale this up fast. So if you have something so disruptive that nobody understands it, that the market is not ready for it, then it will be difficult to go on to the pitching phase. And the team capabilities will be scrutinized in more detail. Of course, you also at this point have to say a lot of your financial strategy and have to argue that the risk profile is high risk, high gain, and it is too risky for the capital markets to go into. But you don't have to go into as many details as when you actually pitch it, because once you get to the pitch, then they will really grill you on the financials. Many of the panelists in the pitching sessions are venture capitalists, and it's really the venture capitalist logic which will decide in many cases who will actually get the funding or who will end up pitching perhaps several times and not get funded. So as you can see, you can get stranded some point of this if you are not ready to scale up using equity. Or if it's not really what you want to do. It doesn't have to be equity from a venture capitalist. It can also be corporate equity, but you have to go beyond business angels to really have a good chance in this, because you have to scale up really fast and you need a lot of money for that in order to be so ambitious that you have a competitive chance to get the funding. So, of course, when we try to validate who have a good chance for this funding, we also think of this, because obviously it's really not of any use to you to be validated to go, yes, you can probably get through the short application with a bit of luck, you can also get approved to the full application to get to pitch. But the profit potential is not enough to be interesting for VC logic. Then perhaps you should wait before you apply to be more mature as a company, also to be more ready that it fits better in your timeline for different seeding rounds. So this is something to have in mind before you even start. We also do see a lot of people who are having to resubmit. This was especially the case during the Horizon 2020, where more than half of the applications were resubmissions. For this reason, the EU has restricted resubmissions now, so you can only resubmit once. And then if you are refused the second time, you have to wait a year before you can submit again. Luckily, in 2022, you have a more systematic way of addressing the evaluators' comments for the full applications, for not getting your pitch, approving your pitch, or for the panel not approving your investment if you got to the pitch. This is, I think, a very good new thing in 2022, because sometimes the evaluators miss things in the application since it's so long, and sometimes they just don't understand the technology, and it could be nice to explain that to the next evaluators. There are also some other new things. These are mainly aimed at making it easier for the evaluators to evaluate your program, your project, not to make it easier for you to write the application. Yeah, this is really the logic of this online platform, I would claim. But still, as Irina mentioned earlier, it is a lot closer to a business plan than a Word document, of course. Just shortly, the percentages. So over 90% of the funded project was including some sort of equity. So the blended finance is grant plus equity, directly started after the grant agreement. Grant first waits with the due diligence till after the project has ended, and equity only was what we discussed earlier. That is a possibility, either on top of a already funded grant only project, or simply that you only need equity directly. That's also a possibility. So that also explains that you can actually have another project that you only need equity for. So you don't need to build on an earlier financed grant project, even if you have one. So the challenges, you really have to look for this strategic autonomy if you want to fit into that earmarked funds for that challenge. As Simon mentioned earlier, it is can be difficult to know what is strategic autonomy for Europe. You might have to read some policy on the web before you can do that. But I mean, it often relates to very deep tech things that you are bringing to the market for the first time. The Fit for 55 is the new Green Deal, you could say, more ambitious on the CO2 emission reductions. And that can be a very good challenge to come under, but really do read the whole challenge text, because there are some subtopics which not everyone will fit in. And for the evaluation, if you choose to fit under the challenge, this is something you choose only for the full application. So everyone are evaluated the same for the short application, but then for the challenge you have to choose, for example, the Fit for 55. And if you do that, there's an additional impact evaluation being made if this project really contributes to the specific objectives of the challenge. And this means that the logic of societal challenge sort of, in some degree, balance the logic of the investment. time is running, so I will go a bit faster through the next slides. I have a case of Café Bueno, who was actually under the Green Deal Challenge last time and applied first grants. They have a demonstration of a value chain, which they had already established to some degree. So the project is mainly scaling up to a biorefinery with a large capacity. And as you can see, they had a large and ambitious investment plan for scaling this high value products from cosmetics up to very fast compared to what you might think possible for reusing coffee grounds. So the question earlier on Pathfinder, I do have some numbers which Barbara and Kathrine was so nice to send me about the sectors applying for this. As you can see, health is very big. And has a high percentage of getting funded. A lot of the funded projects in June were health related. Also, you can see the engineering and technology, and a lot of that was green related. And then it's to me a bit surprising that the October cutoff was so different, that there was so little health in October and so much space and earth and environmental sciences in the October. And also the consumer products and services surprised me, because sometimes it can be difficult to make a large-scale demonstrator when your market is B2C, but they seem to have cracked the codes. Yes, perhaps bilaterally we can go into more details on that. Another case on a grant only in health was Vivostat, who got funded for clinical studies. For the TRL levels to apply as a biotech company for the EIC Accelerator, what you really need to have done is the toxicology. So you don't necessarily need to have finished a clinical phase 1 study, but you really need to have toxicology done, or at least be very certain that it will not pose a problem. If you don't have that, then you will be too risky to apply. Unfortunately, there are not a lot of funding options only available for the toxicology, so some companies got stuck there. That is quite unfortunate. Sometimes the Eurostars projects can feed into that, and I can talk to you bilaterally about that. So the equity, last slide. I often get a lot of questions for this, and now we have a bit more data on what actually happens with the equity. So as mentioned earlier, the difference between blended finance and grant first is that blended finance, you start the due diligence for the equity investment with the EIC fund 1 month after the grant is signed, or at least that's what they say. What we see in reality is that this due diligence starts later and takes at least a year to finish. So be patient or have a plan B. Because that is actually possible. You can ask for blended finance, even start the due diligence, and then actually get the funding from other investors because they are faster and more interested. Then that's actually fine with the EU. Then you can stop the negotiation for EIC equity and just implement your scale-up plans with other equity finance. The grant first postpones the due diligence till after the grant project is ended, which obviously you will have some milestones that you will have to live up to start the due diligence. And so that can be sometimes easier to argue that you will be ready later. Yeah, so and we've also seen that nobody has been deemed ineligible for the grant, even if the negotiation for due diligence didn't work out. There were 2 companies who failed. But that was actually because they were on the way to bankruptcy anyway, so they wouldn't have gotten the grant even if they were grant only. The price is, of course, interesting. You will have to put a price in your proposal, but the conditions will be negotiated with the EIC fund. A lot of the people asking blended funding end up asking for a convertible loan, which will then be converted to equity later, and then the price will be determined by the market of the round once the convertible loan expires. And if the EU wants the same price as your other investors, so the EU prefers to invest alongside other investors, and then they want the same price. So yeah, of course, more can be explained bilaterally. Last slide are the contact details for me and my colleagues, and for other colleagues around in Denmark from other regions. So that's all from me.
Thank you very much, Rasmus, for all the details, information, and the presentation of both programs. We have received a few questions. Some of them you had actually already answered during the slide presentation, but I think that I go through all of them and then we can maybe just like add a few words. So the first one was related to the full application, if it is still 100 plus pages after the updates 3 weeks ago.
Yes, I didn't see, I mean, you only get access to the module for the full application if you have an approved phase 1 application. So I only saw it once with a very generous company who gave me the codes, but I can't really suspect that they change so much that it will not be 100 plus anymore. This is if you print it out. So there are a lot of graphics where you have to fill in boxes and Porter's 5 forces and different things, which will then, it will not be 100 pages content as such, also some repetitions, but still it is long and complicated.
Yes, thank you. And we haven't received more information about that. So we also expect that it is still the same some layout and template. Second question, at a certain point in one of your slides, you refer to the 8.6% some success rate. So the question goes, is the 8.6% out of the ones that have been accepted in the first round, so after stage 1, or overall?
Yes, that's a good question. So so it's only the 8.6% was only of the people who actually submitted for the full application. So if you have to calculate, so the I don't know, it was a lot of people who applied for the short application, and then 56% was approved, but then a lot never made it to send in the full application.
Yeah, that's true.
And then and so it would be like below 4% if you look at all the people applying for the short application until who actually got funded.
Yes, thank you. Then another one related to the success rate, the 58% success rate for short versus 8.6 for long application seems a bit unbalanced. I would have thought that there was a better screening at the short application stage. Can you say something about that?
Yes, I also would have preferred that and expected it even when they launched this 2-stage application process with no funding for phase 1. But this is not how they chose to do it, and I think it's probably easier to manage the application process if you have some quite clear instructions for the evaluators of when should they say go to a short application and when not, and that leads to people decoding that and being successful in the short application.
Thank you. Then another question is, what is the deliberation time on full proposal? You had, if I recall correctly in your slides, from 2 to 6 weeks for the stage 1. Can you say something also about the timeline for getting an answer for a full proposal? I think here it's referred for the accelerator. Thank you.
Yes, I would guess. So the pitch is something like 8 to 9 weeks after the cutoff, and then it's quite fast, and they publicated the dates for the pitches on the website, so you can see them and prepare and block that in your calendar. And then, so after After the pitch, you will get an answer in 1 to 2 weeks, and they actually do that. But then it takes surprisingly long for everything to be signed after that. So you would have to say it's like 5 to 6 months after cutoff before you get everything signed and are finally approved for the grants. But then you get a high percentage, if not all, paid out upfront, which is nice. Once the grant agreement is signed, you get a whole chunk of money on your accounts and you can start the project immediately. And then if you apply for blended finance, the due diligence for that will start. And if you apply for blended finance, you can actually use the equity funding to finance the 30% own financing for the grant project. So you can start the equity activities already during the grant project.
Yes, just a follow-up on that. Regarding still the success rate, do you think that you can increase your chances if you apply for blended finance, or like the chances for success are like despite that?
Yes, I would claim that it would be a higher success chance if you ask for equity in some form. As you could see, quite a lot of people ask for the grant first, which sort of postponed the whole discussion. But it does mean that you have to explain some details about what are your plans on the equity side. But I mean, we've seen from when it was introduced, the equity, the percentage of funded projects asking for equity has gone up and up and up. And now it's more than 90%. Yeah. And so, yeah, it is a good idea to ask for, but please remember that it can be a plan B if you can convince other investors to go in faster if you need the money earlier.
Thank you, Rasmus. We have received 2 more questions, but the time is up, so we will answer them afterwards. Thank you once more, Rasmus, for your presentation. Now I leave the floor to Kathrine for the closing remarks. Thank you again.
And I'll be really brief because we are a bit short on time, and I know that you would rather listen to Rasmus than to me. So I thought I would share my time with him. But I just have a few closing remarks, as Barbara said. We've been through all these different instruments today, and again, you have a short overview of the deadlines. I'm sure you have written them down, and otherwise, you will receive the slides from today afterwards. It will be sometime next week, along with a link to the recording, so you can share it with colleagues or whoever could be interested in this as well. We are planning on having another EIC webinar. It will be sometime in May, hopefully. And whereas today have focused a bit on why you should apply for EIC funding, next time we'll focus on how. So we will invite some successful applicants who can share their story and the process of applying with you. So hopefully we'll see a lot of you again at that point, and we'll advertise it through the same channels. So we hope to see a lot of you there. Then again, I know that both Rasmus and Simon shared their contact details. You're welcome to, of course, contact Barbara or me as well if you have any specific questions regarding the EIC. So, and of course, you're welcome to find us at LinkedIn as well, if you think that would be useful. Otherwise, go and stay updated at the Eurocenter website, or follow us on LinkedIn or Twitter. Yeah. So that was it from us today. So I don't know if you have anything to add.
No, just once more. Thank you very much to Rasmus for co-organizing the event with us and for sharing his knowledge. And thank you, of course, to the two other speakers that had to leave. And from our side, thank you very much for being here today. We know that 1 hour and a half of your time is very precious. We really hope that this can give some added value for you when apply within the European Innovation Council program. And as Kathrine said, just feel confident and contact us if you have any question. And as I introduced in my presentation, there are other actors across Denmark that can support you when applying. And one is, for example, as Rasmus also coming from Greater Copenhagen EU Office, the EU regional offices. And you can also get in contact with consultant or the university where you are employed. And then, of course, the European Enterprise Network. Thank you very much for today. Once more, thank you, Rasmus, for the presentation and co-organizing the event. And thank you all for participating. Bye.
Bye.